Before we start, kindly subscribe to my channel and tell me, where in the universe are you watching from? Callum Vance groaned as he blinked awake, his head pounding. The last thing he remembered was stepping off his diplomatic shuttle, and then a giant armored alien had knocked him unconscious. Now he was in a cage, the big one. The metal bars hummed with energy, and outside, hundreds of warriors in dark, jagged armor roared for blood. Callum sat up slowly. Right, this isn't a friendly meeting. A deep voice boomed, "The flesh-eating human wakes." The crowd cheered, stomping their heavy boots. Callum frowned. Flesh-eating, that was worrying. He squinted at the figure standing on a raised platform, tall, powerful, and wearing a crown of sharp black metal. King Hrathgar, ruler of the Valkyrie. Callum had studied their culture before arriving. The Valkyrie were fierce warriors, living by honor, battle, and ridiculous tests of strength. They thought humans were terrifying because of old rumors, stories of people roasting animals over open flames. To them, cooked meat was a horror beyond words. A voice cut through the noise. "This is pointless." Callum turned to see a new figure step forward. She moved with a warrior's grace, shoulders squared, her chin lifted high. Princess Xyra, heir to the throne. The crowd hushed, even the king paused. "Father," Xyra said, folding her arms, "we should kill him or send him back to his planet. What is this foolishness?" Callum winced. He'd been in awkward negotiations before, but this one had an actual death option. Hrathgar chuckled. "The human will prove himself in battle. If he is strong, he will earn respect. If he is weak, the sands will drink his blood." The crowd erupted into cheers again. Callum sighed. Of course, it's always a death match. Guards yanked open the cage. Callum stumbled forward, straight into the middle of a circular arena. The ground was hard, packed dirt, and a row of weapons gleamed on the side. Then, a shadow fell over him. A warrior twice his size stepped into the ring, holding a blade so huge it could have been a door. The Valkyrie warrior grinned, fangs gleaming. Callum took a deep breath. "All right, let's not panic." The announcer roared, "Begin." The warrior charged. Callum dodged, barely. The massive blade slammed into the ground beside him, sending up a spray of dirt. "Whoa, whoa, time out." Callum raised his hands. "Look, do we have to do this? Can't we settle this with a nice game of chess?" The warrior swung again. Callum yelped and rolled sideways. His heart pounded. Fighting wasn't his thing. Talking his way out of fights was. He glanced at the weapons rack. Too big, too sharp, too deadly. Not his style. Then his eyes landed on a length of rope. An idea sparked. Callum grabbed the rope and ran. The warrior laughed. "Running won't save you, human." Callum didn't stop. He zigzagged around the arena, looping the rope around rocks, weapons, and the warrior's own feet. The Valkyrie warrior lunged and tripped. With a loud crash, he hit the ground. The crowd gasped. Silence. Then King Hrathgar laughed, a deep booming sound. "Interesting," the king said. "You fight like a coward, but you fight well." Callum exhaled, hands on his knees. "I call it tactical survival." Xyra was watching him closely now. Her gaze was unreadable, but there was something new in her expression. Curiosity. The king grinned. "Perhaps the human has some worth after all." Callum groaned. He had a feeling things were about to get much, much worse. Callum Vance had survived, barely. The crowd was still buzzing about his ridiculous victory in the arena. He hadn't fought with strength or skill. He had simply outsmarted his opponent and made a 7-foot warrior trip over his own feet. Now he stood in the grand hall of the Valkyrie Palace, his hands tied behind his back, facing King Hrathgar and his daughter, Princess Xyra. Callum sighed. Negotiating with warlike aliens was never this hard in the training manuals. "You fight dishonorably," Xyra said, arms crossed. Her voice was sharp, but there was a flicker of something in her golden eyes. Amusement? Interest? Callum shrugged. "I prefer to call it survival with style." The king chuckled. "The human may be weak, but he is cunning. That is worth something." Callum perked up. Maybe, just maybe, He could talk his way out of execution. Right. I'm useful. He straightened. Now, how about we discuss peace between our people instead of trying to kill me again? Hrothgar grinned. Peace? That depends. Callum gulped. Depends on what exactly? The king stood from his throne. On whether you will honor the words you spoke in the arena. Callum blinked. Wait. What words? Zara narrowed her eyes. You pledged yourself in front of the court. Callum frowned. I don't remember pledging anything. Hrothgar's grin widened. When you raised your hands and surrendered before the fight, you spoke in Valkyrie tongue, did you not? Callum nodded slowly. He had used his translation implant, trying to sound respectful. What had he said? Hrothgar's voice boomed across the hall. You declared your life and lineage to my daughter. Callum froze. His stomach dropped. He turned to Xyra, who looked deadly calm. Hold on, Callum said carefully. Are you saying you proposed marriage? Xyra finished. Silence. The room erupted into cheers. Callum paled. Wait. That was not a proposal. That was just. You pledged loyalty, survival, and blood, Hrothgar said. That is a marriage vow in our culture. Callum's mind short-circuited. He had accidentally proposed to a warrior princess. Xyra stared at him, unreadable. If you did not mean your words, then you have disgraced me. Callum's brain screamed. Disgracing a warrior princess in an honor-based society. Definitely a bad idea. Wait, let's be reasonable. Hrothgar raised a hand. If you refuse, you will face a trial of punishment. Callum swallowed hard. And what does that involve? The king's grin was not comforting. 100 battles. Or public execution. Callum exhaled sharply. Right. Okay. What happens if I don't refuse? Xyra's lips twitched. Then you will be my mate. And you will have to prove yourself in the groom trials. Groom trials. Callum repeated. That sounded less painful than execution. That doesn't sound so bad. Xyra's expression was amused now. You say that now, human. Let's see if you survive. Callum sighed. He really needed to read up on Valkyrie customs before speaking again. Callum Vance had been in a lot of bad situations before. Hostage negotiations, intergalactic disputes, and that one time he got stuck in an alien swamp with a broken translator. But nothing compared to this. He stood in the center of a massive training ground, surrounded by hundreds of Valkyrie warriors pounding their weapons against the ground in anticipation. At the front, Princess Xyra watched with her arms crossed. To his left, King Hrothgar looked far too entertained. Callum sighed. Okay, quick question before we start. What exactly is the first trial? Xyra's lips curved slightly. A simple test of strength. Callum frowned. Simple, huh? What do I have to do? Lift some weights? Break a board? Hrothgar chuckled. No, you must wrestle a battle beast. Callum paled. A what? A gate at the edge of the arena rumbled open. A deep, guttural growl echoed through the air. Then, a massive creature stomped out, towering over Callum, covered in thick armor-like skin, with 4 muscular arms and a pair of tusks the size of his legs. Callum took a step back. That's not what I would call simple. The warriors cheered. Xyra's voice was calm. If you cannot defeat the beast, you are not worthy to be my mate. Callum glanced at her. And by defeat, you mean? Pin it to the ground, she said. He turned back to the rampaging death monster. Right, just wrestle it to the ground. No problem. The battle horn blew. The beast charged. Callum ran. The crowd booed. Hey, he called out. I'm being strategic. The beast swung one of its massive arms. Callum barely dodged, rolling beneath its legs. The ground shook as the creature stomped. His mind raced. He couldn't fight this thing head-on. He needed a different approach. Then, an idea sparked. He looked at the creature's legs, thick but short compared to its upper body. If he could just... Callum grabbed a spear from the ground, not to fight. He wasn't that stupid, but to use as a tool. The beast charged again. Callum planted the spear into the ground and vaulted over the creature's head. It spun too fast to stop, and its own momentum made its legs tangle. With a thunderous crash, the battle beast toppled forward, skidding across the dirt. The arena fell silent. Callum didn't waste time. He sprinted forward and jumped onto the beast's back, pressing his weight down to keep it pinned. The battle horn blew again. The trial was over. The warriors stared. Then, Hrothgar burst into laughter. "Unbelievable," he roared. "The human has defeated the beast, not with strength, but with cunning." Callum exhaled and rolled off the creature, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Can I get a water break?" The warriors cheered, stomping their feet. Zyra approached him, her gaze unreadable. "You fight like no warrior I've ever seen." Callum smirked. "That's because I'm not a warrior. I'm just really good at not dying." For the first time, Zyra's lips curved into a small, approving smile. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be so bad. Callum Vance had survived the first trial, somehow. Now, he faced something far worse. The second trial. He stood in an enormous Valkyrie feast hall, where warriors feasted on strange, steaming meats, drank from massive golden cups, and slammed their fists against the tables in excitement. The air was thick with smoke, and the scent of unfamiliar spices. Callum glanced at Princess Styra, who sat beside him at the royal table. "Okay, this trial isn't another death match, right?" Zyra smirked. "No, this one is about grace and unity." Callum blinked. "I'm sorry." "What?" Hrothgar clapped his hands, and the music started. Deep drums, stringed instruments, and a fast, rhythmic beat that shook the floor. The king grinned. "The second trial is the bonding dance. A true mate must prove he can move in sync with his partner." Callum's stomach dropped. "Oh no." Zyra stood and extended a hand. "Come, human." Callum hesitated. He had fought a monster, survived an execution, and tricked a warlord. But dancing, in front of hundreds of warriors, this was cruel. The warriors pounded the tables again, chanting, "Dance, dance, dance." Callum sighed. "All right, just try not to step on me, okay?" Zyra arched an eyebrow. "You should be more worried about keeping up." She pulled him onto the stone floor, where other warriors were already moving to the beat. Fast, sharp movements mixed with powerful spins and sudden lifts. Callum swallowed. "I don't know these steps." Zyra's grip tightened. "Then follow my lead." The music intensified, and Zyra moved. Callum barely had time to react before she spun him, then pulled him back into a swift, fluid movement. He stumbled but caught himself, adjusting his steps to match hers. The warriors cheered. Callum exhaled. Okay, I think I got this." Zyra smirked. "Good, then keep up." She suddenly dropped low, forcing him to move with her, then twisted gracefully, guiding him into a turn. The speed increased. Callum's heart pounded, not just from the dance, but from the way Zyra moved. She was strong, controlled, every motion filled with precision and fire. And somehow, he was keeping up. The warriors clapped in rhythm. The music swelled. Then, without warning, Zyra jumped, expecting Callum to catch her. For a split second, panic flared in his mind, but his arms moved instinctively. He caught her midair, spinning perfectly before setting her down with a smooth flourish. The music stopped. Silence. Then, thunderous applause. The warriors roared with approval, slamming their cups against the tables. King Hrothgar laughed loudly, clapping his hands. "Unbelievable! The human can fight, and he can dance." Callum, still catching his breath, turned to Zyra. "So, did I pass?" Zyra studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "You did not embarrass me," she admitted. Callum grinned. "That's the highest compliment I've gotten today." For the first time, Zyra smiled, just slightly. Callum felt a strange warmth in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely doomed. Callum Vance had survived 2 trials. He had outsmarted a battle beast and danced like his life depended on it, because, well, it did. But now, standing in the Valkyrie war courtyard, he had a sinking feeling that Trial 3 was going to be the worst one yet. Zyra stood across from him, arms crossed, her golden eyes sharp. "This trial is simple, human." Callum exhaled. Every time you say that, I end up nearly dying. Zara ignored him. This is the trial of judgment. A warrior must choose between honor and strategy, between tradition and survival. Callum frowned. That sounds really vague. King Hrathgar stepped forward, his deep voice booming. You must make a decision, Callum Vance, one that will determine if you are worthy of my daughter. The warriors gathered around, watching intently. Callum suddenly felt very aware that he was the only human here. Hrathgar motioned toward a massive ancient weapon rack. Callum raised an eyebrow. Okay, what am I supposed to do with that? Zedara's gaze didn't waver. You must choose your weapon. Callum walked over, inspecting the options. There were massive swords, axes, double-bladed spears, all of them heavy, brutal, and designed for Valkyrie warriors twice his size. He picked up a sword and nearly toppled forward. Okay, that's too heavy. The warriors snickered. Callum tried another. Same problem. He glanced at Xyra. Are there smaller options? Zara narrowed her eyes. A true warrior does not complain about the weight of his blade. Callum muttered. A true warrior must have super strength, apparently. Then he noticed something on the side of the rack, a dagger. It was smaller, sleek, and had a curved, deadly blade. Unlike the others, this one was built for speed and precision, not brute force. Callum picked it up, flipping it in his hand. It felt right. The crowd murmured. Hrathgar's smile faded. You choose the dagger? Callum nodded. Yep, it's fast. Smart. It won't slow me down. Zyra studied him. That is not the weapon of a Valkyrie warrior. Callum shrugged. I'm not a Valkyrie warrior. Silence. Then, laughter. Hrathgar threw back his head, roaring with amusement. This human is clever. Callum blinked. Wait, did I just pass? Zyra stepped closer, her expression unreadable. You chose wisely, she admitted. The trial was never about strength. It was about knowing your own limits. A fool would have chosen a weapon too heavy to wield. Callum smirked. So, does that mean I get extra points? Zyra did not smile. No. The warriors laughed again. Hrathgar clapped a hand on Callum's back, nearly knocking him over. The human continues to surprise us. Callum exhaled in relief. 3 trials down, he was still alive, and for the first time, he thought he saw something in Xyra's expression, something less cold. Maybe she was starting to respect him. Maybe, just maybe, he actually had a chance. Callum Vance had passed 3 trials. He had fought a battle beast, danced in front of 100 warriors, and chosen a weapon that wouldn't crush him. And now, as the sun dipped below the jagged Valkyrie mountains, he found himself walking beside Princess Xyra along a quiet stone path. The cheers of the warriors still echoed in the distance, but here it was just the 2 of them. Are there more trials? Callum asked. Zara shook her head. Not tonight. Callum sighed dramatically. Finally, a break from all the near-death experiences. Xyra gave him a sideways glance. You are still standing, human. Yeah, well, I'm getting good at not dying. A small flicker of amusement crossed her face. That is a useful skill. For a moment, there was silence, not uncomfortable, but not quite easy either. Callum glanced at her. So, be honest. Do you actually want to marry me, or is this just some tradition your father forced on you? Xyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stopped, looking up at the sky. Dark clouds gathered in the distance, crackling with purple lightning. A Valkyrie storm. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain. Callum waited. He had learned by now that Xyra chose her words carefully. Finally, she spoke. I was raised to believe in strength, that the best warrior makes the best leader, the best mate. Callum nodded. Okay, makes sense. But then, Xyra continued, a human arrives, a creature we were told was a ruthless predator, a being who eats flesh and knows only destruction. Callum winced. Yeah, I noticed that rumor. Xyra's gaze met his. And yet, you outthink the impossible. You do not fight with brute force, but with your mind. You do not see honor and strength as the same thing. Callum's heart thumped. Is that a good thing? Xyra's voice softened. It is different. A strong gust of wind rushed past them. The storm was moving in fast. Callum rubbed the back of his neck. Look, I don't know what happens next. I don't know if this marriage thing is gonna work, or if your father is just waiting for an excuse to throw me off a cliff. Zyra raised an eyebrow. He would not throw you off a cliff. He would give you a weapon first. Callum chuckled. Oh, that's comforting. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Zyra hesitated for a moment, then said, "You do not act like a warrior. You do not act like a Valkyrie." Callum tilted his head. Is that a bad thing? Zyra studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she shook her head. No. Something warm flickered in Callum's chest. The wind howled, and the first drops of rain splattered against the stone path. Zyra turned toward the palace. We should go inside before the storm reaches us. Callum followed her, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that something had changed between them. For the first time, he wasn't just a human outsider. For the first time, Zyra didn't see him as a mistake, and somehow that felt more dangerous than all the trials combined. The storm had arrived. Callum stood near the large balcony of the Valkyrie Palace, watching purple lightning crack across the sky. The wind howled, shaking the banners that hung from the high stone walls. Rain pounded the city below, turning the streets into rivers. Somewhere behind him, Thyra paced, her arms crossed. Something was wrong. He had seen her in battle, during trials, in moments of quiet thought, but he had never seen her restless. Callum turned. All right, what's going on? Zyra didn't stop pacing. My father has summoned the High Council. They are discussing you. Callum sighed. Of course they are. Let me guess. They're not thrilled about the whole human marrying their princess thing. Zyra finally stopped, her golden eyes narrowing. More than that, there are those who believe you are a threat. They say your victories in the trials were tricks, that you are weak but dangerous because you deceive. Callum frowned. Oh, great. So I'm both too weak and too dangerous. That makes perfect sense. Zyra exhaled sharply. The Valkyrie do not trust what they do not understand. Callum folded his arms. And what about you? Do you think I deceived you? Zyra hesitated, just for a second. But that second stung. Before she could answer, a loud crash echoed through the halls. Callum spun around. What was that? Zyra grabbed her sword from the nearby rack. Stay close. They moved through the corridors, the flickering torches casting long shadows. The storm outside made the palace feel alive, shaking the very foundations. Then, shouting. Zyra picked up her pace, Callum right beside her. They turned a corner and stopped dead in their tracks. A group of Valkyrie warriors stood at the entrance to the Great Hall. Their leader, a broad-shouldered fighter named Varrock, held his sword at his side. His expression was grim. Zyra stepped forward. What is the meaning of this? Varrock's eyes flickered to Callum, filled with disdain. The council has ruled. The human is to be exiled. Immediately, Callum's heart dropped. Wait. What? Zyra's hands clenched into fists. My father would never. Varrock interrupted. It was not the king's choice. The council overruled him. His voice was firm. He is an outsider. He does not belong here. Callum had faced death before, but this felt different. This wasn't a battle. This wasn't a fight he could win with quick thinking. This was power, politics, fear. He took a step forward. I fought for my place here. I passed your trials. Varrock's expression didn't change, and yet you will leave. Zyra moved between them. No, I will not allow this. Varrock's jaw tightened. Princess, do not defy the council. The warriors tightened their grips on their weapons. For the first time since he had arrived, Callum saw real uncertainty in Zyra's eyes. He realized what this meant. If she stood with him now, she would be choosing him over her people. Callum swallowed hard. Zyra, he said softly. She turned to him, and for the first time, he saw something raw in her expression. She was afraid, not of the warriors, not of battle, but of what this meant. The storm raged outside, and in that moment, Callum knew this was it. Their fate would be decided here and now. The storm raged outside, shaking the palace walls. Inside, Callum Vance stood his ground, facing a circle of armed Valkyrie warriors who had just declared him an outcast. And in the middle of it all, Thyra. She stood between him and them, her hands clenched into fists, her sword at her side, her body tense. Callum exhaled slowly. So, I guess this is the part where I run. Thyra didn't laugh. Her eyes burned with something fierce, something unstoppable. No, she said, this is the part where we fight. The Valkyrie warriors tensed. Varrock, their leader, stepped forward. Princess, this is not your fight. Step aside. Thyra did not move. It is my fight if you challenge my judgment. Callum's heart pounded. He wasn't about to let Thyra risk everything for him. Hey, hold on, he said quickly. I appreciate the whole warrior standoff thing, but if this turns into a battle, I'm not exactly built for. Thyra threw him a look. Be silent. Callum shut up. Varrock studied her. The council has spoken. The human must leave. If you defy them, you will lose everything. Your title, your place, your honor. Thyra stepped closer, raising her chin. Then let them take it. The room fell silent. Callum's chest tightened. Thyra. She turned to him, and for the first time, her expression softened. You are not just a warrior because you fight. You are a warrior because you do what others will not. You stood against us, against our traditions, against your own fear, and you did not run. Her voice was steady. So neither will I. The wind howled through the open archways. Callum felt his throat tighten. She was choosing him, not out of duty, not out of politics, but because she wanted to. Varrock exhaled sharply. So be it. He turned to his warriors. Stand down. The tension in the room shifted. The warriors hesitated, then slowly lowered their weapons. Callum blinked. Wait, that's it. No dramatic sword fight, no final battle. Varrock's gaze was unreadable. You have already won, human. The princess has made her choice. To strike you now would be to dishonor her. Thyra held her head high, and honor means everything, does it not? Varrock's expression hardened, but he gave a short nod. It does. With that, he turned and walked away. The other warriors followed, leaving them alone. Callum let out a breath. Well, that was terrifying. Thyra turned to him. You are still here. He gave her a small lopsided smile. Yeah, and it looks like you are too. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The storm outside had started to calm, the wind softer, the thunder distant. Then, Thyra stepped closer. Her voice was quieter now. You do not belong here, Callum. His heart sank. But then she reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. And yet, here you are. Callum's breath caught. She wasn't pushing him away. She was choosing him again. He grinned. I guess that means I should stay, huh? Thyra's lips curved into the smallest, rarest of smiles. Yes, human, it does. Outside, the storm finally passed, and inside the palace, for the first time since he had arrived, Callum Vance knew he had won more than just a battle. He had won her heart.